The custom data layer values feature is the most powerful feature inside of Listen Layer and is available across most of our listeners, including Marketo forms. What this allows you to do is to write rules without any development or programming that push custom values into your data layer. You can then use those custom values through Google Tag Manager to power your analytics. You can add information to your analytics, enhance the data collection, and also increase your ability to segment information. Now, once the feature is turned on, it's important to note you need to have actual variables, custom variables set up at the global level. Now, these are custom variables that you are going to then write rules inside the listeners to define values for when certain conditions are met. In this case, we can focus on an example of actually categorizing our forms. So assume you have 30 or 40 forms across your web experience. Some of those might be support forms where users reaching out to support. Some might be a sign-up form for a newsletter. Others might be a request to download content, such as an ebook. And still others might be an actual request for a demo. Now, obviously, these different form types are different. They have different values to them. So if you were doing conversion tracking in Google Analytics, Facebook, Google Ads, LinkedIn, you would most definitely want to differentiate between a demo form versus maybe a newsletter signup. The demo is obviously way more valuable. So you don't want to just track all of your conversions based on all of your forms based on a single conversion. Instead, you would probably want to actually categorize those forms and then trigger specific conversions accordingly. So here's an example of how that would work. What we've done here is we've created what's called a lookup rule inside of our custom values for Marketo. And first we just name the rule and write a description. And then we're going to select some conditions. Now, in this case, we have 3 different events that we could target inside of Marketo. But I actually want to categorize my forms no matter what, whether the forms are submitted, whether they're loaded, whether the validation fails. We always want to categorize them. And so I'm actually going to leave this empty. What I'm going to look at is the form ID and what is called the origin path name. So here we are looking at an actual live form. And in our automatic values, we'll notice that the listener collects form location, including this element here called origin path name. And so back in our custom rules, what we care about is the form ID and the origin path name. Now with Marketo, you can create what are called global forms, and depending on which page they reside on, they might do something different. For example, it might be a content form on one page, a demo form on another, or maybe it's always a content form, but it downloads different pieces of content. And so if we are going to categorize our forms and name them, we probably want to do it based on both the form ID and the location if we're using global forms. And then in this case, we're going to push values into our data layer for these custom variables that we had created up here in our global settings. And so once this is created, what we'll see is that we have a condition set on the left. And if this is met, which means the Marketo form ID must be met and the origin path must be met, then we're going to push specific values into the data layer over here. Now it's important to note that this is read top to bottom. And once a match is found, it will stop looking. And so what you'll see here is we actually have multiple IDs of 3171 on different pages. And as you work your way from top to bottom through those pages, or as the rule set does, if it finds a match, it will stop. It will return the values from that match. And that's what will be pushed into the data layer for that particular event. As a result, I like to always put a catch-all rule down at the bottom, and you can get some of these from this regex cheat sheet. What this is it's basically saying, once we go through these rules, if we haven't found a form ID match and also a page ID match, then let's go ahead and return these values as undefined. And if I want to, I could actually put some information here into the form name. For example, let's say I want to also know, if I didn't find a match, I want to know what my form ID is. I'm going to put that here. Now, this list here is the list of variables from our data layer that listen layer has seen. And you can manage the settings here under variable settings, and you can create what's called a friendly name, which was why I was able to just easily find, despite these variables being very long and convoluted and there being a lot of them, I had renamed the ID to a friendly name, and that's why I was able to easily find this piece of information. So once you write your rule set, that obviously needs to be published. So we're just going to update this because we added the form ID. And what's going to happen now is every time our pages load or activity occurs on the Marketo form, this custom information is going to be available in the data layer. You can see here, because we matched an actual form ID rule back in our lookup table, the data layer information is defined. And sometimes Marketo likes to push you over to this debug. This data layer information becomes available inside of Tag Manager to do anything we want with. So for example, if we want to take this thing called conversion category, we could actually use this property path name to create a variable inside of GTM and collect that information to segment our reporting. The custom the custom values set, I got to cut off that section and start over. Custom value rules is the most powerful feature inside of Marketo Forms. This is just a small example of some of the things that you can do with it. And we're excited to see what amazing things you create inside of your web analytics tracking.